for instance, the Solarium is an obvious one we do not have. But let's get into it. I think this is the only card we don't particularly have, and so we will be talking about a budget version of this deck later, because as you guys may or may not know, I'm a free-to-play player, and so I try to play decks that I can afford, obviously, because that's what I do. So Zoo has always, and let's call this Zoolock, right? So Zoolock has always been a classic, very strong deck that newer players can generally afford. Now, of course, there's a few things in here which you might not be able to afford. So, for instance, the Solarium, we have Prince Kelesat. These are a couple legendaries, but there's really only two. And you may be able to get some dust and craft these two cards if you don't have them. So, but a little bit later in this deck guide, we will talk about what you can replace these with. If you don't have Solarium, you don't have Prince Keleseth, how can you still play this deck and it'll still be very, very strong. Okay, so let's talk about this deck a little bit here. Let me just go through the cards first, and then I'll talk about how to play it a little bit later. So we have the Flame Imp, always a great start on turn 1 because it does 3 damage. It's really efficient for the mana, right? Obviously, 3 damage to your hero isn't that great, but as we'll talk about later, this is kind of a healing deck, and so sometimes actually in the beginning it's good to get your hero a little bit hurt so that you can then heal him and do some cool stuff with that later. So again, really great card with 1 mana and 3 2 stats, which is absolutely amazing because you can really start doing a lot of damage to the enemy if they don't get rid of it quickly. Kobold Librarian is a great card, and people play it not only in Zoo but also in Q Block and just so many different Warlock decks because it is such a versatile card. It's so useful. So basically, again, it's pretty decent. It's a 2/1 for 1 mana, but the best part of it is, of course, it draws a card. So it's basically like a hero power on a stick. It's a hero power where you get to draw a card with like your hero power, and it does 2 damage to your hero, just like your hero power, which is great because a lot of times you want to be able to do your hero power twice. And so on turn 3, you can do this and your actual hero power, and that turn you'll be getting 3 cards. If you include the 1 card that you get at the beginning of your turn. So that's pretty amazing. Not only that, it doesn't work in this deck, but in another deck that I have, a Q Block deck. When you do Kobold Librarian, it will actually upgrade your Spellstone, which your hero power does not do because it's not a card that damages your hero. So anyways, Kobold Librarian is a great card. Make sure you have that one. It's pretty easy to get. It's just it's common. So all right, next up, Light Warden. Light Warden, it is a rare, so maybe a little bit harder to get than a lot of the commons. But if you're going for the healing package, which is one of the options that you can do for Zoolock, it's really a great card. You want to look at this card in that you can heal anything, right? So this card synergizes very, very well with all your healing cards that you have. Like, for instance, Voodoo Doctor, restore 2 health, Fungal Enchanter, restore 2 health to all friendly characters, and of course, Happy Ghoul synergizes with all that healing stuff as well. So a lot of great healing cards, and you want to look to use those together, right? The whole point of using Light Warden is that you can use her and then buff up her attack when things heal. And of course, if you're playing against a priest, then that's kind of a bonus. Another thing great to do with Light Warden is to Fungomancer her, because again, with only that 2 attack, she's a little bit weak, of course, and even if her attack gets really strong, someone could just easily do 2 damage to her and she's gone. So that's why if you can Fungomancer your Light Warden, that's a really good target for Fungomancer. Just makes her a really, really big threat for, again, only 1 mana, so not bad. Okay, so Soul Infusion. Soul Infusion is a great card. Your best target for the Soul Infusion is the Doubling Imps. right? So you have Soul Infusion, leftmost minion in your hand. If you can manage to get your doubling imps to be the leftmost minion in your hand, then you play Soul Infusion, and now all of a sudden you have what, 4/4. But when you play it, it's going to be 2/4/4s. That's the whole point of the doubling imp, and so that's just amazing. And of course, if you can get Prince Kaliseth, if you happen to own Prince Kaliseth, and you can play that in the beginning before you draw your doubling imps, and then you draw your doubling imps later, then they become 3/3s. Or if they become 3/3s from Kaliseth, and then you Soul Infusion them, and I guess they're 5/5s, which is amazing to be able to play 2/5/5s for 3 mana. That would just be insane. So pretty cool stuff. All right, and again, we're still talking about 1 mana cards, so that's pretty nice. All right, so then we have the discard cards that we have in this deck. So there's the Soulfire and the Doomguard. Okay, so the Soulfire and the Doomguard, obviously they both discard cards. The Soulfire discards 1 card. The Doomguard discards 2 random cards. But both of them are primarily used for burst damage, for like charging, for just, you got to finish them off right there. You're gutting them down to really low health, and then you want to just kind of get that last little tiny bit of damage to try to finish them off. That's kind of the point of those cards. All right, the Solarium, again, you'll notice I don't have this card, but how do you use it? The Solarium is great to, you don't want to use it too early, like turn 1, turn 2, it's kind of useless, but if you just need a little bit of extra gas, you need a few more cards. If you're like running low on cards, and you got to like turn 5 and 6, and you have a pretty good board maybe, or you're getting a pretty low health, and you just need to get a little bit extra. You need a few more cards. Well, the Solarium obviously draws you 3 cards, so it can give you a lot of extra power. And of course, if you can manage to play all 3 of those cards, that's great. Or even 2 of them is really good. Even if you discard 1 card, that's totally fine. It's probably not so great if you, unfortunately, like draw a Doomguard and you can only play that 1 card, and I mean, unless you win the game with it. So that'd be amazing. So yeah, the Solarium's great. Again, if you have it. If you don't have it, that's totally fine. You can replace that with, like, say, for instance, Leroy Jenkins, if you happen to have that. Although, of course, Leroy Jenkins is also a legendary. If you don't have either of those, we'll talk about that later in a different budget version. I think there's, what is it called? It's the 2 mana one that has the 2/4. No, it's a 2 mana minion that has 2/4 and has taunt and it damages yourself. Vulgar Homunculus. So Vulgar Homunculus is maybe something that could be replaced with these. You can replace it with these legendaries if you don't have either of them. Of course, you don't want to put Vulgar Homunculus in if you have Prince Kaliseth, you don't have Solarium. Yeah, so that's not so good. So, for instance, I do happen to have Leroy, and by the way, Leroy's probably a more worthy craft than Solarium, because, oh no, he's 5 mana, right? He used to be 4 mana, then they moved him to 5 mana. So let's put Leroy Jenkins. Leroy Jenkins is probably worth crafting more than the Solarium, right? Because Leroy Jenkins is neutral, right? And you can use him in any deck. Why do I keep missing him? There he is. Okay, so I would put him in instead of the Solarium if you don't have the Solarium. If you don't have either, I think Leroy's better to craft, because you can just use him in anything. He's good for charging, any type of aggro deck. Duperwoo, hey, what's up? What's up, Duperwoo? Thank you for me being your favorite streamer. That's awesome. Thanks for watching. We are just doing a little bit of a deck guide for Zulok for any free-to-play players. So thanks for saying hi. Cool. So anyways, we were talking. Okay, so let me. I'm just going through the cards here. So Voidwalker. Voidwalker is a great card for turn 1. It gives you a little bit of taunt if you're playing against another aggro type of deck. Then you can stop them with the taunt a little bit. It's also a great target for Fungal Mancering as well. So Voidwalker is just a solid turn 1 play. If you don't happen to draw into your Flame Imp, you can always draw your Voidwalker. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the good luck wishes. I appreciate it, Duperwoo. Okay, So yeah, we already mentioned a little bit about Voodoo Doctor. Again, don't forget you can use this either to heal your face if you need to, or if you can actually heal your minions too. Although keep in mind when you're doing that, that when you're playing Happy Ghoul, right, it only actually works at 0 mana if it's your hero that is healed. So don't try to Voodoo Doctor heal one of your minions and then play Happy Ghoul for free, because that's not going to work. So just be careful about that. So you have to, of course, decide what you're doing and make it work as best you can. All right, Doubling Imp. Doubling Imp, we talked about a little bit already. Again, you want to use him with Soul Infusion if you can. It's a great way to if you happen to be at turn 4 and you draw a Doubling Imp, you can play him, because obviously you get 2 minions from the one card, and then you can maybe Fungomancer on turn 5 if you happen to have a Fungomancer as well, and they don't manage to get rid of it. Because as your zoo, you're going to be playing lots of minions really quick, so it can be tough sometimes for the other player to keep up with all the many minions that you're going to be playing. So sometimes that works out pretty well. Fungal Enhancer I mentioned a little bit before. The goal here is to, of course, try to play it, heal something at least, and maybe play a Happy Ghoul. Or if you happen to have a Light Warden on the board, or you can play them together, the Light Warden and the Fungal Enhancer, and you can heal lots of things. If you can manage to get like a few minions who are a little bit injured, and then play Fungal Enhancer with your Light Warden, then that's just amazing. It's really good. And it's going to be a tough choice to decide. Okay, so how do I know what to do? Like, how do I know? Oh, do I just play my Fungal Enhancer just to heal some minions, even if I don't have a Light Warden, or do I save it? Do I wait until I have a Light Warden? It really kind of depends on what the situation in the game is. Are you still fighting for the board, or have you got to the point in the game where you're just trying to go face? How many cards are in your deck? How likely are you to draw a Light Warden? And maybe if you have extra mana, you want to hit your hero power, which people call tap, because maybe that way you can draw into your Light Warden, and then you can play the Light Warden and the Fungal Enhancer together. So again, there's a lot of different. You always want to think about all your choices, right? If there's a way that you can get more information, like for instance, hit the hero power, draw a card, or play Cold-Blooded Librarian and draw a card, well, maybe you will draw into a better play than you have right now, and so you should do that. If you think you're going to draw a card, if you're going to play this draw a card, you should do it at the beginning so that you have more information to better, do a better turn, possibly do a better turn than you're able to do right now when you have a different card. So always be thinking about your options, guys. That's kind of just how you play Hearthstone in general. That's kind of just general topics, but particularly you got to think about how your cards interact together and what synergies they have. Life Drinker, yes, it does damage enemy heroes, so it can be a little bit of burst damage if you need it, just if they're at 3 health. But another thing to think about is it also heals your hero, right? So it can also be used with Happy Gold. This is another, healing synergy, right? Life Drink is another healing synergy, which I didn't mention before, which can get your Happy Ghoul to be 0 mana. So that's pretty awesome. All right, Sauronite Chain Gang. Let's talk about that. Sauronite Chain Gang is a card that is, again, just very solid. It's another card that is one card that gets you 2 minions on the board, which again has great synergy with Fungomancer, right? It's a great way, even better way, because you literally would want to play Sauronite Chain Gang on turn 4, and then if you can follow up with a Fungomancer, pow, that's like really good, right? Because then you're gonna get it to be a 4/5. So again, Sauronite Chain Gang has such great synergy with Prince Keleseth, with Fungomancer, just a great way to, and it's a little bit weaker than it used to be, right? Because it used to be a copy of it, but now it's just another Sauronite Chain Gang. So even if you buff up the first one with Prince Keleseth to be a 3/4, well, guess what? When you play it, the second one's only a 2/3 now because they nerfed it, because that was a Shadow Walk issue. But it's still a great card. Even with a tiny little bit of nerf, it's still a great card to play in Zoo. Again, the taunt gives it a little bit of durability, kind of protects your face a little bit. So that's a great card. Doom Guard. When you're doing Doom Guard, that is just again a great card, as we talked about with Soul Infusion, Soul Fire before. Just a great burst damage. And let's also talk about how you want to use these cards, right? So if you have these cards, you want to make sure you don't discard your other important cards. And obviously, it would be great if you can manage it to not discard any cards at all, right? The way you do that, right, is you try to play the other cards in your hand first, right? So you whatever other cards you have in your hand, you just get rid of them, you play them all, and then maybe you can manage to be at a point where you only have your Doom Guard in your hand. That's the only card in your hand, and of course you just play it if you have the mana, and pow, right? You've managed to play Doom Guard without discarding any cards, which is awesome. That is super fun. So yeah, if you can manage to do that, great. Same thing with Soulfire. It's a little bit easier to do that because it's only 1 mana, so it's easy to get rid of all your other cards, then play your Soulfire. And then even if you have more mana after that, if you've totally emptied your hand, well, hit your hero power, get another card, and see what you can do after that. All right. Who knows? Maybe you empty the rest of your hand, you play a Soulfire, your hand's totally empty, you tap, maybe you'll tap into your Doom Guard, and then you can just finish them off. You can do like 9 damage without discarding anything. Who knows? That would be great if you could manage to do that. So, okay. As I talked about, I put Leroy Jenkins in there. Just in case you didn't have the Solarium, you play Leroy Jenkins. It's just yet another way to do a little bit of burst damage. It's even more burst damage than the Doom Guard, because as you see, it's a 6 attack. So, and again, it doesn't discard anything, so you can play him if you're at turn 10. If you manage to survive to turn 10 and you haven't lost yet, and you might be able to win, you can play Leroy, and then you can play the Doom Guard if you have them both. And wow, look at that, you can do 11 damage. So it's amazing. Anyways, I think that's it for the cards itself, and then let's talk about mulligans. One of your greatest cards to start with is Prince Keleseth, if you have him in your deck. So Prince Keleseth is really good. It just buffs up your whole deck, and just as a Zoolock, that's just going to be amazing because you're playing minions all the time, and you're just going to draw minions all the time as well. So you play him, and then you start drawing things. Obviously, if you draw Keleseth on, if you draw him on turn 4 or something, you want to play him first and then tap so that you can have the card that you just buffed up. You draw the card that you just buffed up. So that's one of the few times in this deck when you actually want to do something else first and then draw later, because Prince Keleseth is buffing up your deck, right? And so you need to try to make sure you do that in the right order. Okay, other mulligan things besides Keleseth, obviously you keep him. You definitely want to throw away minions and mulligan minions that cost 4 or 5, because they are cards that you can't play in the beginning. So that's kind of also obvious. You want to have your 1 cost and your 2 cost minions. All your Flame Imps, Void Walkers, always keep those. Those are great. Yeah, you probably don't want to throw them away. Even if you're looking for Prince Keleseth, you still want to keep your 1 cost minions, and maybe if you don't have Keleseth and you have the Vulgar Homunculuses, and you can keep those. Those are fine, because yeah, you want to do things that you can play early in the game. So that's kind of obvious. And also, if you have 1 healing card, you might want to consider keeping it. Like the Happy Ghouls, if it's synergy, like, oh, maybe I can find a Voodoo Doctor, right? It's a little bit risky though, right? Because if you have a Happy Ghoul and you don't draw a healing card, then it's like, oh, well, that's not good. So it's probably not worth keeping a Happy Ghoul if you don't have other healing cards, right? If you do have other healing cards, obviously keep your Happy Ghoul, because it'll be like 0 mana, which is amazing. So keep that in mind, that's what you need to do. You need to just, if you have the healing and the synergy cards, you can keep them both. If you don't, well, don't keep the Happy Ghoul, right? But you can keep a Voodoo Doctor. That's debatable, right? So like, oh, I mean, you can keep a Light Warden if you want. I suppose it's a 1-cost card, so it could be worth keeping if you don't have something to heal with, because it's still a 1-mana card. You can still play it, and you might be able to throw it on the board, and then maybe you'll draw into a healing card, right? Something like that. Also, Voodoo Doctor is not really that useful by itself. Like if you're not hurt, for instance, at the very beginning of the game, turn 1, you don't really want to play Voodoo Doctor on turn 1 because you're not healing anything unless you have a Flame Imp, right? So if you have a Flame Imp and a Cobalt Librarian, okay, if you have one of these guys, you can hurt yourself and then you can heal yourself, and that's pretty good. So keep that in mind. It's you just gotta look at what options you can. Try to plan out your turns in advance. That's another great thing to do as you become a better Hearthstone player. Is you want to like plan out not just the turn you're on, but plan out turns in advance. So try to think about what's gonna happen next. All right. I think that's about it, guys. I think we talked about most of these things. So yeah, let's talk about budget versions, right? So if you don't have this, what can you do? So let me we'll say Zulok, 2 legendaries, and then let's talk about what if you don't have any legendaries. Let's do a budget one, okay? So we'll go. Let me just go copy paste the deck code for that one. Okay, the budget deck. So I'm just going to show you an example of the budget version of the deck.